Everybody joining me on the show today. Kind of tease this last week who was going to have on the show. Jake Crain. You can check him out every day on Crain and Company over at the Daily Wire at 2 o'clock. And Jake, I appreciate you coming on the show, talking some college football. We're less than 100 days, so we're getting close.
Yeah, look, every day we get closer, I get happier. I mean, it's funny. I was, did it for a long time, coached college football for over a decade, and it seems like when you're coaching or if you're playing or if you're an administrator or on the staff, the off season just flies by. But, now in sports media and as a fan watching and analyzing, it's at a snail's pace. So hoping this summer hurries up. We get to August, get to, quote unquote week 0 in September, which is not a real thing. But look, anytime we get closer to football, I get closer to euphoria, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think we're in the worst part of the off season because
Yeah, the
at
dog
least
days, man. The
it
dog
is.
days.
Because at least after season, then we get the second signing day, and then we get a
Yeah.
bunch of other news. And of
Well,
course,
you got
this
a
year,
lot of adrenaline left over. Like there's still a lot pumping. You're still in that mode. I mean, right now it's just look, we're halfway through the 5K and it's hot and there's no people holding water on the sides. You just got to push through it. You got to find a way. It's what we're doing.
and this upcoming season is kind of interesting because it almost feels like, in a way, we're getting a college football reset. It's like it's a brand new world. College athletics as a whole, yes, but college football as well. The Big Ten and SEC, their new look, the new TV contracts, the new playoff, everything. When you look at the SEC going into the 2024 season, what are you looking at as probably the main storylines as we're kind of counting down these under 100 days?
Well, I mean, there's so many. If we're going to take a macro, 30,000 foot to a college football, we've seen conference realignment, but seeing the SEC on ABC and the Big Ten on CBS and a 12-team college football playoff and what's gone on with NIL and the transfer portal. I mean, it's just been like one big pole shift. I mean, that's what they say, every, whatever 3 million years, the pole shift. It seems like we've gotten one of those here in college football. It's kind of the perfect storm. Everything's come together. And that's what, again, it's from a macro view. There's so many storylines, but then you look in the SEC and there's to hold you over for a whole winter there. I mean, you got Nick Saban obviously being gone from Alabama. Can Brian Kelly turn LSU into a more balanced team and not just look like old Ole Miss? And is new Ole Miss looking like old LSU, a team that's not only good offensively but good defensively as well, as they pushed I think they're the most dangerous team to Georgia this year on the schedule. If we're being honest, when you look at the way it goes down for Ole Miss on their side too, with no Alabama. But I mean, Hugh Freeze in year 2 at Auburn. You go look at a team like, Arkansas and Sam Pittman and a team like Florida and Billy Napier. Are these the last gasp or the death rattle years for those two programs? So from the top to the bottom, outside of Vanderbilt, there's a ton of storylines and there's headlines everywhere you go. Tennessee starting a brand new quarterback that I'm really excited about. South Carolina and Lenora Sellers is starting a brand new quarterback that I'm excited about. I'm just worried about who's going to be protecting them and if they're going to have a run game. So you can look north, south, east, or west, and there's a headline that you can feast on for a whole Thanksgiving.
Yeah, absolutely. So no faith in Vanderbilt getting to the 6th win.
I mean, if we're talking about football, no. I mean, if we're talking about a spelling test, then yeah, give me the Commodores.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It's going a little wild. We used to see the division too. That's another thing I didn't mention. So you said, okay, you finished 7th in the division. Well, we're not going to have that now. You finished 16th in the conference. That sounds a whole lot worse. It's the same thing, but it sounds a whole lot worse.
Yeah, well, look, I think getting rid of divisions, and it's funny now that you say that, talk about the SEC headlines. I mean, hell, Oklahoma and Texas are coming in here. I didn't even bring that up. That may be the biggest one. But look, I think getting away from divisions was smart, not only because geographically it was stupid. And what I mean by that, putting Auburn and Alabama in the West and Missouri in the East is one of the top 4 dumbest things I've ever seen in my life. And the other 3, I don't even know if they're that bad. So the geography made no sense. And then the way the scheduling worked, I mean, the fact that you can be in the same conference as another team and not play that team at their place or even in general for 20 years is an absolute travesty. Now, with no divisions, you can play every team home and away over a 4-year career. So I think it was the right move. I think it's going to make it even more compelling coming down the stretch. I know it adds a million tiebreakers to the mix, but I think it's going to be better. And I'm happy. That was one of the changes that I was happy to see.
Look, I was looking forward to it. One of my favorite games of the year is SEC championship game. And just now that we know we're getting the best 2 teams every year
That's
in
exactly
that
right.
game. I mean,
That's
that's what you
exactly right.
want. That's what you want. You talked about. I think Ole Miss is the biggest threat to Georgia. You mentioned that in the past on your show, but I want to talk about Georgia. Everybody's looking at this team as the favorite in the SEC. Kirby Smart,
Yeah.
and you know this group one loss last year, and you cannot not tell me they weren't one of the four best teams of college football last year. But they made the playoffs just because the way the system was set up. You got to think this is going to be a team coming in this year in 2024 that's going to be hungry, looking to get back on the mountaintop. And with Carson Beck, I mean, the way he improved too last year, very impressive. But what are your thoughts, Georgia, going into this year, trying to reclaim that throne?
Yeah. Well, the past couple of years, Kirby's kind of he's kind of had to manufacture adversity, right? Create a way to put together a narrative that the players can get behind and say, you know what, we're going to get together and go topple this narrative. Well, this time he doesn't need to. They obviously missed the playoff after losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game last year. I think they probably would have won it. I think they would have beat Michigan again, but they weren't there, and Michigan won it. So there, and it's not, and they lost a ton of guys to the draft again. But it's not like Georgia doesn't have really good players. They return one of the top two rosters in college football. I think it's them and Ohio State. Carson Beck's an NFL player. There'll be a couple guys that we haven't seen yet because they've waited their time, or maybe they're brand new. They're going to blow up. I think Dominic Lovett is going to be a household name by the end of this year. So if you're a Georgia fan, yeah, it's a good situation. You ought to wake up every morning and feel pretty good about it. I mean, you look what Georgia loses up front, then you look what they bring back. But that's why when you turn your program into a machine, which is what Kirby's done, and you stack unbelievably talented and deep recruiting class on unbelievably talented and deep recruiting class, you're going to get a lot of rinse and repeat. And in this situation, it's not a bad rinse and repeat. It's a delicious rinse and repeat. It's the best rinse and repeat. So right now, yeah, Georgia's the big dog. Now, do I think there's a possibility they could lose at Ole Miss and then beat Ole Miss in the SEC championship game? I think there's a legitimate possibility of that happening. But yeah, Georgia's the favorite. They should be the favorite, and they're probably going to smush a lot of people into a locker in front of everybody at the high school this year.
It's going to be interesting because there have been criticism of Georgia in the past, the schedule. Well, this year, that's not going to be a criticism. You open up with Clemson, which I'm not as high on Clemson, but still, that's a
They're going to
name.
murder Clemson, Phillip.
Yeah,
They're going to
yeah.
murder Clemson. I'm not going to play. I watched people play this game with Nick Saban in these opening games. Oh, well, Florida State, or oh, well, Miami. This is a team that could. I'm Georgia's going to kill Clemson. I don't know if Clemson's going to score more than 10 points. I would be absolutely surprised if they scored more than 13. And I don't dislike Clemson. That isn't me saying I don't like Clemson. I think Georgia's going to do to Clemson what Bama did to number 3 ranked in the preseason Florida State when they broke DeAndre Francois in half. I think they're going to do to Clemson what Bama did to Miami in the opening game in Atlanta and just beat them to sleep over and over and over again and make them like it. I think they're going to do, again, what we saw Georgia do to Oregon a couple years ago, open the season, when they just absolutely pistol whipped them for 4 quarters. I don't think Georgia may come out of the gates a little bit slow offensively, but this Georgia team is way more talented than this Clemson team, and they know how to prepare for this game. You talked about that chip on the shoulder mentality. I don't know what the spread is right now. I need to go look at it, but sign me up for Georgia to cover, and you can probably add 3 more to it.
Yeah, and I've still look. When the schedule come out, I don't know why they put this game at 11 o'clock either Central Time.
I think you want to know why? You want to know why, Phillip? You want to know why I think? I think they know that Georgia's going to kill Clemson. That's
That's
what
it.
I think. That's my honest answer.
Yeah, get that one out of the way. Maybe when not everybody's up or whatever,
Yeah.
just earlier in the day. And of course, like I said, they got Texas. You mentioned Ole Miss. They play Alabama, so it's going to be interesting with the Georgia schedule this year, navigating those teams they're going to be playing against.
No, without a doubt, they're going to be tested. But at the end of the day, again, you think about it, 12-team playoff. Let's say Georgia does, and this is you talk about a high-class problem. Oh no, catastrophe, you go 10-2. Georgia's still getting in the playoff. And if they get in that 12-team playoff, in my opinion, in a single elimination tournament, I'm going to take Georgia. Even right now, again, I think them and Ohio State. And this is Will Howard's got to prove himself at Ohio State now. Like, this isn't some foregone conclusion that Will Howard's just going to come there and Kyle McCord went 11-1 and really wasn't that bad. And they ran this man out of town. So Will Howard, we'll see. He doesn't have to win the race. He just doesn't need to crash the car. And that's something that we've got to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And they talked about Ole Miss. Like I said a few minutes ago, I know you have mentioned Ole Miss. You view them as the biggest threat to Georgia. I think some people out there are probably just saying just because of name brand Texas, but Ole Miss. And I was just looking at the roster and prep. They have loaded up not just offensively, defensively, but we all know with Ole Miss, the offense gets the attention because of Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart's coming back, and then going out there and getting Juice Wells from South Carolina. Tremendous receiver. I mean, they've got Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins coming back. I think Ulysses Bentley is a really good back. I know some people probably look at, Quincy Junction and all, but they are loaded on this roster. But how do you see, or let me word like this, what do you see about this Ole Miss team that thinks you say, okay, this is the biggest threat? Loaded roster, but what else is there?
Well, I think this is going to be the most balanced team that Lane Kiffin has had, and I think that Ole Miss can actually compete with the top of the top on the line of scrimmage. All that stuff you just said is great. Like all these receivers, that's great. Juice Wells, that's great. Good running backs, that's great. Where's the difference? Where do you bridge the gap? You bridge the gap up front on the
Mm-hmm.
line of scrimmage, and really, the offensive line hasn't been a problem at Ole Miss. I'm not worried about Lane in the offense. I'm just not. The bugaboo for Ole Miss is they've been awful on defense. Last year they weren't. You know that I think they led the SEC in turnover margin. They were top 3 in the SEC in disruption percentage from a front seven standpoint into the backfield per play. And all they've done is load up on the defensive line as well. Like this Ole Miss defense is going to be good. Like let me just say that again, so everybody here. This Ole Miss defense is going to be good. So you pair that schedule with the returning production, with the added production, not only at wide receiver, but in the front seven on the defensive line, and Ole Miss with a team that has never played in the SEC championship game. Think about that. They were co-champs with LSU of the West in 2003, but they didn't play in the SEC championship game. So they're going after things that other people just take for granted. Like there's something bigger going on at Ole Miss, and it feels like this is the culmination. And everybody talks, oh, Lane Kiffin hasn't broken through and won the big game yet. It You only haven't until you have. People said the same thing. Oh, Kirby Smart can't beat Nick Saban. Kirby
Mm-hmm.
Smart can't beat Nick Saban. What does he do? Oh, Jim Harbaugh can't beat Ryan Day. Michigan's never going to win it. What does he do? This stuff, you get some bites at the apple until you bite through it. And at some point, Lane is going to bite through it. This just feels like with all the stuff on the periphery, when you look at all the stuff on the field and off the field, all the stuff that you can control and all the stuff that you cannot control, when you put it together, this is the best chance. Now, will they go blow it? We're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. Who really the hell knows? But I do know this is the best chance they've had, and they do have experience winning and losing, which is the unteachable intangible.
Yeah, and like I said, bringing Walter Nolan from Texas A&M. I mean, that's one example. I mean, defense line, and they had
Yeah.
guys coming back too. I mean, Pete Golding did great work with that defense last year. I mean,
Look, Pete Golding, I don't think he got enough credit at Alabama. I've never seen
didn't.
somebody get in trouble giving up 19 and a half points a game. That's amazing. I know you do have Bama's players, but other guys are on scholarship too. But what he's done at Ole Miss, I think he feels appreciated at Ole Miss. And when you feel appreciated, not that Pete didn't work hard, you work even harder. You find a new part of yourself. You find a new piece of yourself. You find a way to reinvent yourself in a good way, right? That doesn't lose your identity, but also moves you forward. So I think Pete's as hungry as the players are.
So I'm gonna go in state here where I'm at, Alabama and Auburn. I'm gonna start with Alabama. Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. There's a question I have for you, and we talked about Nick Saban not being there anymore. And I think Kalen DeBoer is a tremendous coach. Most people will tell you that, and I'm very intrigued what he does with Jalen Milroe at quarterback. That's one thing I'm really intrigued by. But do you think there's actually going to be an impact of not having the Nick Saban factor? I'm not saying coaches and other teams were intimidated by Nick Saban. Maybe some were, just seeing the GOAT on the sideline, but still not having him there. What impact do you think we could see with that? Or am I just looking into something that's not there?
Well, I mean, I think it's everything when you lose the greatest coach of all time. And look, Coach DeBoer is a fantastic coach, but I don't think really anybody's going to be able to replicate the dominance of Nick Saban outside of Kirby Smart. Now, that doesn't mean Alabama won't still be really good. That doesn't mean Alabama won't win a national championship. That doesn't mean that Alabama is descending back into the dark days of the Mike, and Mike's. That's not what I'm saying. But when you look at all Nick Saban brought, it wasn't just the intimidation factor, it was the execution factor. It was the recruiting factor. It was at its highest peak. It won't be that good again. So you don't expect the result on the field to be that good again. I've continued to say that I think Kalen DeBoer's tenure at Alabama will be defined by the level of freak out the first time something inevitably, like it always does, goes wrong, even when Nick Saban was coaching. I mean, look at last year. You lose to Texas at home. You go down to USF, and somehow you win that game with a lacrosse player at quarterback, and he was able to figure it out and fix it. Well, that's Nick Saban. So he built up equity with the fan base. Hey, yeah, we should freak out. We lost to Texas. We didn't look good against South Florida, but it's Nick Saban. He'll save us. And guess what? He did. Kalen DeBoer does not have that equity built up. That he hasn't proven anything to Alabama fans. So what happens if they go out to Wisconsin? They'll beat Western Kentucky. They'll beat them up. I mean, it'll be like a giant fighting a fat kid. I mean, you just beat him to sleep. But what if they go to Wisconsin and something happens? And then you play Georgia at home and something happens, and that's 2 losses. They going to show up to the mayor's house with pitchforks and torches? Like, this is a fan base that has seen nothing but really excellence. Even without winning a national championship in the last 3 years, you've still been unbelievably excellent. I mean, it's, to quote my friend T-Bob, it's like rooting for the Soviet Union. Like, it has to be perfect. Like, that's what it is. So will there be any level of understanding the first time that it goes wrong? And the answer to that, Philip, I can go ahead and tell you, is no, because fan is short for fanatical. So what does that mean? It's up to Kalen DeBoer and how he bounces back from that. And again, it could all go right early, but eventually something is going to happen. And once that happens, we're going to find out with Kalen DeBoer when he sees it. Washington fans are crazy. I'm not downplaying the level of care or want to from Washington's fan base, but you are stepping into the Thunderdome, right? You are walking into the Death Star and sitting in the Emperor's chair and wearing that black cloak. They expect you to be the Emperor. So that, to me, is where I see Alabama. Now, as far as Jalen Milroe, we talked to Coach DeBoer down at SEC Media Days. He's going to tailor the offense to what Jalen Milroe does best, and that's smart. Now, Ryan Grubb, his right-hand man, right, his play caller, the guy that took a lot of pressure off of him offensively, he's gone. He's in the NFL. He's had him for a long time. But having Jalen Milroe come back is a guy that's won a lot of games already. A guy that has the locker room. That's easy. He locked that up a long time ago, right? And he's going to be able to be a motivator that if it does go bad, he's going to be in Coach DeBoer's corner and kind of rally everybody. So that's what I'm kind of waiting to see.
What, on the other side with Auburn, year 2, Hugh Freeze. I think it's a great idea. Great thing he's taking back to play calling. I'm really intrigued to see how that's going to work. I mean, they have completely rebuilt their wide receiver room. I mean, it almost looks like all new guys, both recruiting, transfer portal, a couple of guys coming back. Peyton Thorne's the quarterback. I know a lot of Auburn fans have questions about that. When you look into year 2, how big is year 2 for Hugh Freeze, and what do you think he needs to accomplish this upcoming season?
Well, I mean, Philip, this every year when you coach at a place like Alabama or Auburn or Florida or Tennessee or Georgia, every year is a big year, regardless of what you did before. But if we're going to look at it from the sense of what does he have to do, I think it's got to be at least at the minimum 7-5 for Auburn fans to not feel like that seat may be heating up on year 3 for Hugh Freeze. Now, I think 8-4 is the floor when I look at the schedule, and you mentioned it, outside of the quarterback room, which is a big deal. Make no mistake, I'm not downplaying the significance of the quarterback position, but Auburn basically, with this roster, I think flipped it about as good as you possibly could. I think it was one of the best jobs in the country in the transfer portal and in recruiting. But it wasn't just the wide receiver room. Again, I'll go back to what I was talking about earlier. It's up front. That's where you've got to improve. I mean, Auburn last year on the offensive line wasn't bad. I think they've gotten better there. Defensive line and rushing the passer and adding depth to the interior, that's where they've really changed. Auburn couldn't rush the passer very well last year. They got gassed in third and fourth quarters, and they were still able to stay in the Georgia and Alabama game, which I think is kudos to Hugh Freeze and what his staff was able to do. But as far as looking at this schedule, I think there's a decent chance Auburn could start 5-0 or 4-1, depending on what happens week 5 against Oklahoma and Jackson Arnold's first road SEC game. That should be interesting. The schedule is a little back heavy. Once you got to go to Georgia, got to go to Bama, got to go to Missouri, got to go to Kentucky. But if you're able to hold serve at home and you're able to sneak one of those road games, I think 9-3 is the ceiling. I think it's going to be either 9-3 or 8-4. It's very tight. The house is very small from ceiling to floor. So, again, what does he have to do? Got to show progress. You got to show you're continuing to build the monster. But as far as leading up to the season, what we've seen through the portal, pretty much in every position group. Secondary, there's a little bit of concern there, but I'd rather have a little concern in the secondary and feel good about yourself up front, because you can hide an average secondary with a really good front seven. You can't hide and you can't have an elite secondary with an average front. You can't cover guys for 6-7 seconds. Doesn't work like that. So no, I think Auburn's improved, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned earlier about, Will Howard there at Ohio State, and not to the level. No one's expecting, I think, national championship from Auburn, but still with Peyton Thorne with the weapons. And we saw a little bit what Cam Coleman is capable in the spring game. Perry Thompson's coming soon. All the receivers. I think Auburn has good running backs. Rivaldo Fairweather's a talent. Is it kind of like a deal with Peyton Thorne? It's like, just be a distributor, be the point guard, get the ball out to these guys, and just don't make
Yeah.
mistakes.
Well, what I've said is he doesn't need to be Batman. He just needs to be a really good Robin. And
Mhm.
you look at the running element too. I mean, that adds to this RPO game that Hugh Freeze wants to do. It opens everybody up. I thought last year one of the most disappointing things with Peyton Thorne was his decision making with the RPO, when to hand it, when to pull it and pop it, things like that. He's a coach's son. Maybe it's him being in a new system. Maybe it's him being in the league for the first time, but he took a lot of high pressure snaps in the Big Ten, which they played some pretty good ball over there too. So I expect his decision making to improve. And again, look, you mentioned point guard. It's putting the ball where they can catch it and letting your guys go make a play. But most importantly, it's making the right decision. If you make the right decision, you have a decent run game around you. The system can work, and it can work well. And now Auburn actually has pieces, not just one or two. They have multiple pieces that can hurt you. So again, it spreads you out more thin as a defense, and the more you're spread out, the easier it is for me to split you. So I do expect some improvement there. I don't think Peyton Thorne's going to win the Heisman. I don't think anybody's expecting him to throw for 350 yards a game, but we are expecting you to make the right decision. Don't stare at the rush. Get the ball where it needs to go, and continue to be a leader.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and there's so much other SEC stuff we could touch on,
For
but that
sure.
would we'd probably be here an hour or two. A 16 team conference. There's so much to talk about with
Mhm.
everybody. But anyway, Jake, I appreciate you coming on. It's fun getting your takes on all things college football and SEC. Let the listeners and viewers know where they can find you. Where can they check out Crain and Company?
Yeah, man. Look, we're on YouTube, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify. It's Crain and Company, CRAIN and Company. We go live each weekday at 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. We have live calls, a live chat. We talk a ton of college football. My co-host David Cohn played quarterback at Michigan, not the baseball player David Cohn. Then my brother played wide receiver at Western Colorado. So we get into the nitty gritty. We have fun with it. If you like old school sports shows, I think you'll like that one.
All right, everybody go check out Crain and Company. And Jake, I appreciate the time, and hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Definitely, man. I'm gonna go eat some dinner and watch the Celtics game.